Welcome to another dojo topic where today we're asking the question, is self-realization worth the effort? So whether you're a spiritual seeker, awakening, awakened, there's a reason that you attracted this video. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and share the topic that we discussed today. Again, the dojo is a place to live happy, even when the world around you feels like it's falling apart. And sometimes it can feel like the world's falling apart, right? When we're trying so hard to grasp a concept or understand something. And self-realization, we know the more you try to grasp it, the farther away it seems to be. So before I go any further, I just want to remind you that before we begin, nothing shared here is meant to become a rule, belief, or teaching you must follow. You are always invited to take what resonates and release anything that doesn't, because your inner wisdom is always the final authority. Last week, our conversation was the waiting game, that illusion of when. And if you were unable to be with us live or you've not yet seen the video, I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video. So today we're talking about the question, is self-realization worth the effort? And then something else to think about with that question. What if you're looking for has been here all along? So this seeking that we do, what is that? What is self-realization? What is it? What does it even mean? So let's begin with what self-realization is and what it's not. Self-realization is not the realization of a self. It's the recognition that what you are has never been separate from infinite, attributeless awareness. Self-help would ask, how do I improve myself? Self-realization recognizes there was never a separate self to improve. Self-realization isn't healing, therapy, coaching, or self-help. It's simply recognizing that all of those approaches begin with an assumption that there is a separate self that needs to become something else. Self-realization puts an end to psychological suffering born of identification with the separate self. Pain, grief, illness, loss, and emotions may still arise, but they are no longer experienced as happening to a separate me once self-realization is realized. Self-realization doesn't necessarily change your life. It changes your relationship to it. The body continues, the mind continues, thoughts continue, emotions continue, life continues. All of these continue. So it's not like, oh, yay, I've finally am self-realized, but I still have thoughts. So maybe I'm not self-realized. That's just the mind coming back in, trying to pull you back into the dualistic realm. So all of those things continue, but suffering begins to dissolve because the one who believed it was separate is recognized to have never existed in the way it once did. You begin to see that the personality, the roles, the stories, and the experiences all arise within awareness. They are real experiences, but they're not what you are. What you are is the aware presence in which every experience appears. So just as a movie unfolds upon a screen without ever altering the screen itself, every experience unfolds within awareness without changing what awareness is. The screen is never burned by the fire, never drowned by the flood, never wounded in battle. Likewise, awareness remains untouched by every experience that appears within it. This is why self-realization brings an end to psychological suffering, not because life stops happening, but because the mistaken identity begins to dissolve. And what remains is what has always been here: infinite, attributeless awareness. So we return to the question we began with. Is self-realization worth the effort? Ironically, it's a question that can't be answered by the separate self. The separate self can only imagine what self-realization might be. It can read about it, think about it, discuss it, even seek it, but it cannot know it. Only the self can recognize the self. Only awareness can know itself. And when that recognition dawns, the question quietly disappears. One of the beautiful gifts of self-realization is the ease with which choices begin to arise, not because you've mastered decision making, but because you've recognized that nothing essential is missing. There's nothing to fix, nothing to figure out, nothing to heal, nothing to understand, nothing to explain. The separate self believes every invitation must be accepted because it might finally provide what's missing. Another workshop, another book, another certification, another spiritual practice, another teacher. Self-realization quietly reveals nothing is missing. From that recognition, declining an invitation becomes just as effortless as accepting one. Not because you don't care, but because you're no longer seeking yourself through the experience. You choose from wholeness rather than toward it. This also helps explain why so many profound teachers have been misunderstood. Visionaries such as Florence Scovel Shinn, Dr. Joseph Murphy, Neville Goddard, and others weren't primarily teaching techniques. They were pointing toward a way of being. They spoke from a recognition that consciousness precedes experience, that peace isn't created by the mind, that abundance isn't earned through struggle, that life reflects being. Yet many students heard something different. Instead of recognizing the state of being from which these teachings emerged, they turned the teachings into methods. Affirmations became formulas, visualization became another task, and repetition became another spiritual practice. The hope was that if the words were spoken often enough, if the technique was perfected, psychological suffering would finally come to an end. But the teaching wasn't about perfecting a method. It was pointing beyond the one who believed a method could complete them. The words themselves were never the power. The power arose from effortless being. So perhaps the question isn't, is self-realization worth the effort? Perhaps the deeper question is, what am I truly seeking? If what you're seeking is a better life, there are many paths. If what you're seeking is a better version of yourself, there are many paths to that as well. The question is to know, are you seeking or are you being? But what if your seeking is the recognition of what you've always been? There is only one. That seeking has you thinking that there's somewhere you need to go, somewhere you need to be, something you need to figure out. And that's when it's so wonderful to remember that what you're looking for is the very thing that's looking. I created a couple things just to look at, and you can pause the video here and take a look at these and see if any of them resonate with you. just sit with some of them. Just say them out loud or to yourself and take the time to just pay attention. Are you seeking or are you being? You'll know the difference because one comes from a space of peace, effortlessness, relaxation, and the other comes from a sense of doing, seeking, needing to find. So now that we've explored today's topic, let's create a bridge from the message to the doorway by leaving you with two questions. So the questions we're asking today is self-realization worth the effort? And I'll leave you with these two questions. What do you believe self-realization will give you? And who is it that believes something is missing? Again, when you answer these questions, you can see whether you're pursuing self-improvement or awakening to your true nature or living as self-realized, being the isness that just is, without sounding like a fortune cookie, just be. Everything is. And then, of course, you are cordially invited to live a self-aware existence, whatever that means for you. I'm so happy that you came across this video, that you attracted it, that you're here, whether you were with us live or watch the video replay. You're welcome to join us live if you feel the pull to that. We're here every week and we have amazing conversations around these topics. So now that we've gone through today's topic, how would you answer those questions? And how would you answer the question, is being self-aware worth the effort? Is self-realization worth the effort? And then remember the answer. It's effortless. There's no seeking that needs to be done. There's nothing you need to do. And sometimes I think that answer can be the hardest for most of us to accept because we're so used to striving, doing, and setting another goal, something, you got to have something else, keep climbing that ladder. And that can feel so overwhelming a lot of times. Just be, just is. Isn't it wonderful just to relax into self-realization? Just be. If you want any kind of support with this, visit me at masteringyourbeliefs.com. In the meantime, this is Nancy Muller, the one and only Life Sensei, saying ciao for now.